Now then, speaking yesterday, the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, responded to stories of sexual abuse and the disgrace of a Labour MP, Jared O'Mara, by denouncing what he called a warped and degrading culture that exists and thrives in the corridors of power, including Westminster. Diane Abbott, now the Shadow Home Secretary, has lived inside that culture for 3 decades, and she joins me now. Diane, you have been there for a long time. Do you recognise that as a warped and dangerous culture for women?
Yes, and if anything, it was worse when I first became an MP. And you will remember, you were there. You would have sort of micro sexual aggression. So women would get up in the chamber and Tories opposite would do this gesture like they were weighing their breasts. There was harassment. There were jokes which weren't that funny. It was partly to do with the fact it's a very male environment, 650 MPs. When I went there, just 20-odd women. It's partly to do with the idea that all these men away from home. It's partly to do with the fact there were 8 bars and the very long hours, and the bars are open for as long as we're sitting. And partly with the notion that what happens in Westminster stays in Westminster. It was worse. It's a little bit better now, but there's a long way to go. Now,
I don't want to embarrass you in any way, but did you yourself face kind of harassment of this nature during your...
Well, I have to say, when I was a new MP, I had a little boy, I was a single mother, and I didn't have time to hang around bars. But I heard from colleagues and I saw some of the gestures and the noises that were made in the chamber. Claire Short, who was a colleague at that time, she tried to have a campaign against page 3 girls, naked women in the Sun, and the abuse she got, not just from the Sun itself, but from other MPs. It was appalling. People would be appalled now if that kind of thing happened.
So we fast forward to now, and it's still about men in power and women in a relatively powerless situation in many cases, researchers and so forth. And there's now a WhatsApp group, and women are talking to each other. I don't know if you're a member of that group or if you're aware of that, but there is a different atmosphere.
The world has moved on. I mean, when I first went into Parliament, so many of those men had been to all-boy boarding schools and had really unreconstructed attitudes to women. The world has moved on. There are more women, and women, actually, middle-aged women, are less likely than middle-aged men to believe that young researchers are irresistibly sexually attracted to them. So the fact there are more women MPs helps with that. But it's still an issue, we've seen the problems with Jared, our Labour colleague, we've had to suspend for quite unacceptable language about women.
And we read in the Times today lots and lots of allegations about people. The question is, Jeremy Corbyn said something needs to change. And I suppose the question is, what needs to change? Are you attracted by the idea, for instance, I think John Mann has talked about some kind of central figure at Westminster who is there to receive those kind of allegations and to investigate them privately and securely?
Well, just this July, the Labour Party's changed its systems. So we're going to be setting up where these accusations are made. People will be able to make them anonymously. We're going to have special sexual harassment panels. We've got a special process for dealing with it, and I think all parties could learn from that. But I would say this isn't a problem for any particular party or faction of a party. This is a party, it runs right across Parliament.
That said, Jared O'Mara, when did the Labour Party know about what he'd said?
Well, when I heard about it was last Monday. He came to the PLP, he apologised. A lot of people took his apology quite seriously, but then on Tuesday we had more information. On Wednesday he was suspended, and the Labour Party is looking at it. There's going to be an investigation.
Because there was a text which suggests the Labour Party were told about this a month ago and didn't do anything.
I don't know anything about that. The party knew about it, as far as I know, when the allegations became public last week. And in any event, this is a matter for Ian McNicol and the party machine.
Now, clearly, we're not here in any sense to kind of sit in judgment without knowing all the facts over anybody. But nevertheless, if these kinds of things were said by any Labour MP, should they stay as a Labour MP?
I think you're talking about the language and the tone.
Yes.
Yes, that language and that tone is not acceptable in 2017. We have now moved on, and the leader of the Labour Party is very clear that we are going to be a party with zero tolerance for sexual harassment.
Do you think Jared O'Mara can stay as Labour MP?
I can't judge because I've not seen the evidence. What I would say is that that language and that tone is unacceptable. The party's moved on, and you know, where you have that sort of language and where you have that sort of harassment and sexual microaggression, it demeans and diminishes all women. That's why it's important to take a strong line.
I don't know if you heard Michael Gove on the Today programme making those comments or that joke about Harvey Weinstein. You know, it's been all over the press ever since. Do you think that's an overreaction? Did you hear it? Were you shocked when you heard it? Were you surprised?
I heard it and I didn't think it was funny. You know, particularly in Parliament, making sexual harassment a joke is one of the reasons it's not been dealt with. We've got to realise that it's undermining and demeaning for women and undermines and demeans the institution.
What about somebody else who's much closer to you, John McDonnell, when he said at a meeting, and I think you were actually at the meeting, talking about, it was a sack Esther McVey meeting, and he said, why are we sacking her? Why aren't we lynching the, and then a word I can't use on a Sunday morning. What did you think when you heard that?
I wasn't at that meeting.
You weren't at that meeting? What do you think about
that meeting? I believe he was quoting from somebody else, but let me repeat, it undermines the case against sexual abuse and sexual harassment if we try and make it a problem of a particular party, of a particular faction.
I absolutely accept that. I'm only asking you because, as it were, this is your bit of the party and your faction of the party, and everybody has to call everybody out on these kind of things in their own institutions and their own organisations as well. I mean, Jess Phillips, who's chair of the Women's PLP, said the targets of this vitriol, when it turns to violent vitriol, we should kill Thatcher, we should lynch Esther McVey. The common denominator always seems to be the one thing, that these people are women.
Yeah, sexual abuse and abuse of women has been a problem for a very long time. But as I say, it's a problem in all parts of Parliament.
But including on the left, as well as the right.
You know, making this a kind of party political
I'm
thing.
not trying to make it party political. I'm just wanting you to acknowledge that it affects your part of politics as well as the other lot.
With respect, Andrew, one of the first things I said is this is about Parliament as a whole. It's not the preserve of any one party. And I'm sticking to that because I know that's correct. And once you start to make it a kind of tit for tat and a kind of finger pointing and a kind of party or a factional thing, actually you undercut what ought to be a move forward to eliminate this type of talk from Parliament as a whole.
Do you think this is a moment when the actual culture is changing and that men across Parliament or in the BBC or anywhere else are now going to look at what's on the front pages and change their behaviour? Is this an important moment?
I hope so, because although Parliament's long had this toxic climate, as Jeremy referred to in his speech yesterday, I don't believe that broadcasting or newspapers, for instance, are any better. And I do hope that in the aftermath of the revelations about Harvey Weinstein and the film industry and modelling, that all male-dominated professions will look at the way women are treated, disrespected and spoken about, and we can see a sea change in attitudes.
We haven't talked here since the general election campaign. During that campaign, you were singled out and treated very, very aggressively by some parts of the media and indeed by other politicians. Theresa May kept using your name, Diane Abbott, Diane Abbott, Diane Abbott, again and again and again. Do you think you were unfairly singled out? Were you being victimised in some sense during that campaign?
Well, I know I was singled out. I was rung very early in the campaign by a colleague fighting a marginal constituency, and she said there were lorries going around her constituency with a picture of me and Jeremy on it, which is.
Why do you think that was?
And also, the Tories spent a lot of money on targeted Facebook advertising about me. I think they spent more money than me than anybody else.
Do you think it was about the colour of your skin?
You would have to ask them, but there's no question that of all the front bench, of all the Labour front bench, I was singled out. The Daily Mail had, I think, 12 pages on me and Jeremy and John McDonnell, although Jeremy has said they should do 24 pages next time when we get even more votes.
It was a torrent on you. Did you at any point you think, do you know what, I've had enough of this, I can't put up with this any longer, I'm going to leave public life?
It was very difficult, but you know, I got fantastic support, both from my friends and family, but people in the constituency, and people are still very supportive now. Fortunately, the British people are better than their tabloid press and some of their politicians.
Can I ask you about a Brexit? We haven't even mentioned Brexit yet. It's changed days. You have been very, very clear that abolishing free movement is connected, in your view, to anti-immigrant racism, is what you've said. And yet, when we leave the EU, which we will almost certainly do in March 2019, you may well be the person who ends free movement. a lot of people who voted for Brexit don't still understand what the Labour Party's position is going to be on free movement and migration after we have left the EU.
Well, first of all, there's lots of perfectly respectable reasons to vote for Brexit. Tony Benn, who both you and I knew, he would have voted for Brexit had he been alive for the referendum. He always argued for coming out of the European Union. But there's an anti-immigrant undercurrent, the kind of Nigel Farage narrative, which was not something which Tony Benn would have had any time for. When we leave the single market, free movement falls, because free movement is part of being in the single market.
So if you were a voter who decided they wanted to vote for Brexit because they wanted fewer people coming here from the EU, will that happen under a Labour government?
Under a Labour government, we will have fair rules, managed migration. We will deal with some of these predatory employers who are using immigrants, not just European Union immigrants, but immigrants from other parts of the world, to undercut British workers. We will deal with that, and we have spoken about the things we would do.
To put it brutally and coarsely perhaps, there's a lot of people out there who want fewer Polish people here, fewer French, fewer Spanish people arriving here, and still don't know whether that would be the case under Labour.
If people want fair rules and managed migration, but if they also want a jobs Brexit and a Brexit which doesn't harm the economy, they should be voting Labour, and many of them did, in fact.
One final question. In this morning's papers, you'll have seen a report that prisoners are to get the vote, certainly in some circumstances. What is the Labour position on that?
Our position is, the European Court of Human Rights has been saying for some years that we can't stop all prisoners having the vote, and the Labour Party believes that we should indeed. In the end, we have to support the position of the European Court of Human Rights.
So prisoners should have the vote, as far as
it's
you're
not whether
concerned.
they should have the vote, it's whether we should abide by the European Court of Human Rights. And I think abiding by the European Court of Human Rights, whether we're in the EU or not, but abiding by those human rights issues is very much a tenet of the type of socialism I believe in.
One final question. I forgot it earlier on. Do you think a Labour government would or should recognise the Catalans as an independent state? Nice easy one for you.
The Catalan, it's a very difficult and tragic situation. That we would want to see it resolved by negotiation, and we would want to see it resolved under the laws and legislation of Spain.
But the government has been clear, the government here has been clear, they would not recognise an independent Catalonia. I'm just wondering if the Labour Party position is the same.
We are clear that this has to be resolved by negotiation. The pictures that we saw, that you saw, of what happened when the Catalans tried to have their referendum of violence and the police, they were dreadful. No one wants to see those in a fellow European country.
All of this is true, but it's not quite an answer to my question.
We believe that the situation should be resolved by negotiation. It's not for us to cut across the laws and constitution of another country.
Right, Diane Abbott, thanks very much indeed for talking to us.